The newsroom. Welcome to the France 24 debate on a day of drama in the Arab world. Over the past 2.5 years, panelists on this very show have repeatedly insisted that, come what may, the push towards civil liberties and democracy won't be stopped. You won't be able to put the genie back in the bottle. That view of the Arab Spring is certainly being put to the test this Wednesday, with claims that Syria has experienced its bloodiest 24-hour period to date. We're going to be looking at the latest there after the break. First, though, we're going to Cairo and the dismissal of remaining charges against longtime strongman Hosni Mubarak. Egypt's ruler of 2 decades could walk free as early as Thursday. This as the new army-backed authorities continue to round up senior members of the ousted Muslim Brotherhood and weigh up charges against its leader, Mohammed Badie. European foreign ministers have condemned the past week's crackdown, where the death toll has now equaled that of those 18 days back in January 2011 that overthrew Mubarak. With Mubarak set to walk, his successor, Mohamed Morsi, set to take his place, is it back to square one for Egypt? With us to talk about it is activist Victor Salama. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You supported the coup that ousted the Muslim Brotherhood at the beginning of July.
Popular coup.
A popular coup, as you put it. From London, Muslim Brotherhood spokesperson Mona Al-Kazzaz. Thank you for being with us. And for two views on the West's next move, from the U.S. Capitol, Eric Traeger of the Washington Institute, and from the UK Capitol, Jonathan Paris of the Atlantic Council. Now, former France 24 Cairo correspondent Igal Sadoun was there to witness the fall of Mubarak. He is with us in the studio. Thanks for being with us. The France 24 debate, where you can always join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. Before we go to our panel, let's first go to our current Cairo correspondent. Catherine Stapley joins us. Catherine, hello. Can you remind us again, how come Hosni Mubarak is set to be released?
Well, today the court released him on the last remaining corruption case against him, and it related to allegations that he received gifts from the state-run publisher Al Ahram. Now, his family had said they paid back the value of the alleged gifts, and that's why his lawyer said he should now be released. But he won't walk free from prison today. There are still legal wranglings going on. The prosecution want to appeal the decision, and under Egyptian law have 48 hours to do so. Although we're now hearing that the judges may not allow any appeal to happen. And if and when he is released, Hosni Mubarak won't be able to leave the country, as he is subject to a travel ban. And of course, he is still being retried on charges of failing to stop the killing of protesters during the January 2011 uprising that led to his ouster. Now, the reason he doesn't have to remain in prison while that retrial goes ahead is that he's already served out the maximum amount of pre-trial detention permitted in that case, which is 2 years in prison without a final conviction. But I think one thing is clear from today, that Hosni Mubarak will not be released today, but he could very well be free by the end of the week.
You were saying how the courts could decide not even to hear an appeal, but could the authorities overrule the courts? Is it a sure thing that he could walk on Thursday?
Well, I don't think the authorities can legally do so. I mean, particularly at the moment, they can't be seen to overturn the rulings of the judiciary. And I don't think they'd have any intention of doing so either at the moment. We have to remember the interim government was installed by the military, and Hosni Mubarak is a military man. Many people here believe that the release of Hosni Mubarak was always part of the plan when the army removed Mohamed Morsi from power on July 3rd. But I think it's a huge gamble by the authorities. I mean, it is certainly reinforcing the view here, which is really starting to take hold, that the mass protests that led to Morsi's ouster were the work of the Falul or the Mubarak-era figures who want to reinstate the old regime. And that could turn the tide of protest against the military, and more people could side with the Muslim Brotherhood and the anti-coup alliance. So there could be a move by the authorities to keep Mubarak in prison if huge protests erupt, if and when he does come to be released. But it just shows you how the political scene has changed so rapidly that Mubarak's release could now even become a reality. So some activists here are saying Mubarak's release would be the final nail in the coffin of the January 2011 Egyptian revolution.
All right. So perhaps expect the unexpected. Catherine Stapley, I want to thank you. The divide between Egyptians can be measured by the spectrum of opinions on Mubarak, on the news that Mubarak had been cleared of those charges.
This is a disgusting charade by the judiciary, the army and the police in order to reinstate Mubarak and his corrupt regime and to rob the people of their revolution.
He should have been released a long time ago. God forgive them for what they have done. And the judiciary has ordered this, so that should be enough. I have complete faith in the Egyptian judiciary.
Mona Al-Kazaz, what's your gut feeling? Is Hosni Mubarak going to walk free within the next 24 hours?
Please allow me to set the framework of what has happened. In 2011, Egyptians rallied in the masses to oust the Mubarak, a dictatorship who violated our human rights, who violated our civil rights as Egyptians. And then we had 2 years of building our democracy, where we had our first democratically elected civilian leader. And then comes in a military junta with a civilian facade and usurped the Egypt's institution through a coup d'etat on the 3rd of July. The return of Mubarak, and it's today, I think the return of Mubarak and clearing him from his charges is actually what was expected. The 3rd of July was a coup to reinstate a military regime, to reinstate an oppressive regime, a regime that has usurped Egypt's human rights. And we've seen Egypt's states. We're seeing violations of human rights a day after the other. We're seeing mass killing. We're seeing mass murder amongst those who are opposing this coup d'etat. We're seeing oppression of the freedom of expression. We're seeing a clampdown on the free and international media. We're seeing a return of a Mubarak regime, and then the only thing that was remaining is the return of Mubarak himself, which we're seeing today under the silence of obviously the international community. This international community that has backed up the dictatorship for decades. We're seeing them being very neutral now, as in they didn't support the democracy as they should have been. I think there's a problem with the voice, actually.
We can hear you. We can hear you
Hello?
loud and clear. But I want to go to Victor. We'll try to sort out those technical difficulties. Victor Salama, you heard our correspondent Catherine Stapley say many of those who supported the army's move, the ouster of Mohamed Morsi,
that's the vast majority of the Egyptians,
could
actually
change their mind if they see Mubarak walk free. Are you one of those people?
No, of course not. And honestly, Mubarak now is completely irrelevant politically. As a person, he's completely irrelevant. There are two jokes now in Egypt. It's about Mubarak being freed and Mubarak being dead. And, none of those jokes are really funny, but it shows that no one really cares.
But what a symbol. You understand that it's a bit of a shock for people who don't live in Egypt, or even people who are inside Egypt.
Actually, you said it. For people who don't live in Egypt, it's more of a shock than for people who live in Egypt who really have forgotten about the whole Mubarak thing. What I wanted to say to Mona is that I would have loved if she had been talking about freedom and the political process and the route towards democracy in October and November, when the constitution was being drafted, because that's where all went wrong, really. It's at this particular moment. Egypt had left the path to democracy at this particular point. The constitution,
which brings us back again to the timing, because that was you saying back in November. According to the Associated Press, in the last week, we've had nearly 1,000 killed. It's been a brutal crackdown.
It has been a brutal crackdown, and it's a fault. It's a fault by the military. It's a political fault, and of course, first of all, it's a moral fault. But it could have been avoided. I think it could have just left out the sit-ins and let them go, let them be. But there were a lot of provocations about the Muslim Brotherhood. The other thing that I wanted to say is that Mona just forgot about one simple thing, which was the 30th of June, when we had tens of millions of people in the streets. The lowest estimation is 12,000, the highest estimation is 30,000. Pick your figure in between. And this happened, whether she wants to forget it or not, this is a fact, this happened. And the army wouldn't have been able to go in the streets if there weren't that many people in the streets. So, yes, she was talking about January 2011. Same thing happened, but in much, much bigger scale in June 2013.
All right, let's go to Eric Traeger in Washington. Eric, what do you make of the timing of all of this?
Well, first of all, I want to second what Victor just said. It's very important to emphasize that this train really went off the rails due to Mohammed Morsi's decisions, due to the way in which the Muslim Brotherhood tried to consolidate power for itself. And I frankly want to push back against Mona's claim that the international community is backing a coup. What the international community is trying to do is work with a new government after the previous government under the Muslim Brotherhood completely lost control of the state. Look, I was in Egypt on July 2nd and July 3rd, the tail end of this new uprising, call it a coup. Obviously, I go to Egypt a lot, and what I saw in the previous months was that the Muslim Brotherhood and Morsi had just totally lost control of the state. So his presidency was untenable, and that's ultimately why he was removed. And he has almost no one but himself and the Muslim Brotherhood to blame. So I do not appreciate Mona's blaming of the international community for something that could have been averted had the Brotherhood managed the country in a better, more inclusive, more democratic way. And by the way, that's not at all to endorse the current period.
But Eric Traeger, it does boil down to, at the end of the day, Mohammed Morsi in jail, Hosni Mubarak out of jail.
Well, I think Victor had it right when he said that this is a symbolism that is resonating very much for foreign observers and in the West, but that many Egyptians are really shrugging at. Morsi lost control of the state. Mubarak is not being reinstated. He's being released on some sort of legal technicality. I mean, I'm speaking to Egyptians all day today. I even spoke to a January 25th youth protester who said, we're going to back the state in its fight against terrorism. He said he would not protest Mubarak's release, which actually just reflects how much the mindset in Egypt has changed over the last 2.5 years.
Jonathan Paris, do you agree?
Let me make a couple of observations. First, unlike in Europe, which it seems to view society as conflict, post-conflict society, we don't have wars anymore in Europe, the Middle East is still subject to, I would call, the rules of the jungle. You have a winner and you have a loser. So when you say one guy is in jail and the other guy is about to be freed, it's part of the rules of the jungle. The army, they look at the situation and say, well, if we do all the things that the West wants us to do and make nice to the Muslim Brotherhood, somehow we will live happily together. But I'm afraid that's just not the way it works. The other thing I would say is Mubarak is not being freed. He's being released from jail, but as I understand, he's going to be subject to a trial. So it's very important for people to understand he's not just being released from all charges. He is actually just being, in American terms, I guess, released from bail. I mean, without bail, but he's being released from jail. But he cannot travel from the country. So he's very much has to submit to the judicial process.
Igal Sadun, when you think back to those 18 days back in early 2011, and you hear what our correspondent Catherine Stapley was saying at the outset of this show, do you think that we've come full circle?
No, we haven't, because things have moved quite a lot in Egypt. As we can see, the people of Egypt have taken up to the streets to oust for a second time what they saw as a threat to their freedoms, a threat to their way of life. And that's very important. I think that the Egyptian system, Egypt as a country cannot move back to the 24th of January 2011, if you will, because now the Egyptian people knows that they have that power to oust governments. The timing is very powerful, as you said. If you believe in conspiracy theories, it's going to be difficult not to think that the army have used the Egyptian people to achieve one of their goals, is to be back to the situation before the statu quo ante, and which was basically an illegal Muslim Brotherhood movement dismissed of the political life, where they, as an institution, the army, will get back its free hand on politics, the economy, with a rhetoric that is very important, which is you're either with us or against us. And it's very interesting, once again, to see Victor Salama, who is very involved in the 2011 uprising, to, in a way, defend the army, because he has to choose a side between the army and the Muslim Brotherhood. And I know, because I know Victor, and I know his opinions, that he doesn't defend the army. He knows that the Muslim Brotherhood, or that's what he feels, is more dangerous to his way of life. And that's very interesting. That didn't happen when I was there.
We have a tweet here saying, millions in the streets in a country of 85 million is not a good enough excuse for a bloody coup and mass murder. Again, I want to talk about the timeline, not of what's happened since 2011, but what's happened in the last week. One of the big events of this week has been the arrest of the Muslim Brotherhood's Supreme Guide late on Monday, Mohammed Badieh, scheduled to appear next Sunday in court on allegations of incitement to murder of protesters in front of the Brotherhood's headquarters on June the 30th. It's the first arrest of the Brotherhood's top leader since 1981, this before Mubarak became president. The movement's named an interim guide, Mahmoud Azat, described by many as a hawk and a conservative. Eric Traeger, we're going to have a period now where both sides dig in their heels and it becomes more and more radicalized?
Well, what I think you're going to have, actually, and what you're having, is the decapitation of the Muslim Brotherhood. Remember, Muslim Brotherhood is not like a normal political party. It's a hierarchical vanguard with a pyramid-shaped structure in which very top leaders give commands down through a chain to low-level activists. So if you take out the top, you really disorganize it, and that's what the military has done. It's sort of like a mafia. If you take out the Don and the Capo regimes, all that you're left with are just sort of random operatives.
If you want to stop the downward spiral and get people to the bargaining table, who do you bargain with if you're throwing the top leadership in jail?
Look, I want to emphasize, I don't see a good case scenario here, but I always thought that negotiations was very unlikely. What you've had, as you've correctly stated, is a coup in Egypt. And when you have a coup, those that have come to power don't typically negotiate with those that they remove from power. They try to destroy it. And again, I'm not endorsing that at all, but I do think that these wheels were set in motion by the basic reality that President Morsi had lost control of the state. So whether there was a coup or an uprising or some other scenario, his presidency was not tenable after June 30th.
All right, there's a lot more to talk about on this issue, unfortunately, because of so much that's going on and the fact that we're going to have to turn our eyes to Syria in part two of our discussion. I want to thank our guests. I want to thank Mona Al-Kazaz and apologize for the technical difficulties we had with her in London, Eric Traeger in Washington, Jonathan Paris in London, and with us Victor Salama and Igal Sadoun. Thank you. Stay with us. More to come in the France 24 debate as we set our sights now on Syria and the question, have Syrians witnessed the bloodiest 24 hours there since the start of the civil war?